Hello, hello, hello again, and welcome to the end of March, beginning of April, high quality podcast. We're here today to talk about a number of topics, chiefly being the emergence of anti-intellectualism in the United States, concerning things like the recent legislature putting forward options against climate change science, cutting National Institute for Health and Research funding, and a number of other things along the lines of some odd and, personally, I feel disturbing legislation going on in the United States government. But to start things off, I think we could get on the elephant in the room and get chatty about climate change.
Hey,
Nick?
first of all, real quick. So we were off last week. You had, I don't know, you had something to do. What was it? Someone was staying with you for a
Yeah,
bit?
I had a friend staying with me for 3 days and kind
Now,
of offset things.
did I ask you if to ask them if they wanted to be on the podcast that week? I think I forgot to.
I don't think so, no.
Oh, they would. I'm pretty sure they would have. Who wouldn't want
Probably.
to be on this wonderful show?
It's true, although they weren't around on Thursday, but, that's how it goes.
Oh well.
Either way.
Back to our schedule. Anyway, let me read you a quote I read today that I could not believe I was reading. This comes from a man in rural Kansas. He's from a town that has 460 people in it.
Okay.
He owns a store. It didn't say what kind of store, just a store, grocery store or something.
General store or something of the like.
He told NPR, if you ask me, would I rather see the money go for our water plant or to possibly try to control our borders and the security of our nation? The security of our nation is more important to me. The man is putting national security ahead of water.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does sit on top of the Ogallala Aquifer, so he doesn't really have to worry about it too much, except that he does.
This place in Kansas, it said in the article, had issues with water. I forget what it is. They had this big, like, multi-million-dollar water treatment for the area in Kansas there. I forgot what required it, but it was something pretty substantial. And, of course, the money that's going to that, they want to get rid of it. And apparently these people are fine with that. And there's tons of people like this out there that think this way.
Yeah. It baffles me how some people can deal with things like that. But I actually, in looking at all of this, not just climate change denial or things with, denying one of the very basic needs of human survival,
Like
water. There's a study that was done by a researcher that is in line with, or was done with regard directly to climate change, where they were looking at what makes intelligent people on either side of, whether it's left or right, what makes them deny climate change. And it essentially comes back to what we had talked about previously on the first podcast, where the alignment of intelligent and well-read individuals on either side of politics will more than often align with the consensus of their colleagues, or trying to align with a certain political ideology that is along where they want to fit into a group. And I think that still holds true, especially when you're looking at people in rural areas. The general populace out there is going to be more concerned about one thing that may not make any sense to us, but it is in line with their kind of group, and so they're more apt to agree with that. That's at least what I see in that. I mean, you got to find some sort of reason why someone would say that they care more about national security than water, especially when they're insulated in the center of the country.
I couldn't tell you. I try to get into the minds of these people, and I just struggle to wrap my head around it. Like this, the only way you can think that is you have to imagine that there are like thousands of, you know, security breaches every day coming into this country to, blow stuff up and, and enact terrorist attacks, and that's not happening. And not only that, that's not a reason for you to sacrifice clean water either. If you don't have clean water, then you what's the point of protecting yourself? You're not going to be around. You're going to be dead. You don't have any water.
Exactly. And I mean, it's prevalent in the rest of the world, not just in the U.S. when you're seeing things like this guy in Kansas who doesn't care about enough about water as he cares more about national security, and people in Flint, Michigan who have literal just brown water flowing out of their taps and
ask them if they care about national security versus water.
Well, exactly. It depends on the area you're in, but I mean, if you look at like Africa or developing parts of the world, there are like 2 million or 20 million people without water. There's a huge number of people in the world who don't have clean water. And I can guarantee you, wherever they are, they don't give as much of a damn about national security as they do about just surviving with getting water.
I mean, the fact that there are people who think that way out there, it's not surprising to me that there's so many people who don't believe in climate change. It's not even a belief anymore. It's just you're ignoring facts, plain, simple facts. And you have to think along the lines of, okay, why would you be against this kind of scientific evidence? Why are you against climate change? Why are you against, like, today Scott Pruitt is letting this scientifically proven toxic pesticide be used again on farms? It's toxic to the farmers. Like, it's toxic to people.
Well, yeah.
His own agency did a study and showed that. And what did he do? He just gave him the middle finger, said, no, go ahead, go use it out there. I don't care if people get poisoned.
Yeah.
It's sad that you're putting science second to money. That's the sickening part to me. And people buy into it just because it's a Republican saying it. It's that bias, like you said before.
Right. And I mean, looking at it from an economic point of view or financial point of view, when you're concerning yourself with money, which honestly is a huge part of it when it comes to policy making, when you're dealing with lobbyists and people who are ingrained into the government system trying to push forward their agenda or their particular desires, whether that be for money or power or just control over a certain sector, which we'll get to a little bit more later with the whole internet privacy deal going on. Cacophony would be a more apt term for that. But with climate change specifically, and going back to that study that I was talking about, what the outcome of that research was that they were able to, or tended to, clump people in the study, Americans in the study, into two groups, one being hierarchical individualistic, which would be like the mentality of leaving people alone and respecting authority, more kind of, I guess you could say, more on the right-leaning or Republican side, reducing of government control, things of that nature, and egalitarian communitarian, which would be to reduce inequalities and look out for the betterment of society as a whole. So those would be the people who would more align with climate change being a threat to everybody and wanting to stop it and study it, or not stop it, but at least try to fix it and understand it. And it was shown that these groups were just divided in such a manner as that they would align people in certain areas where the consensus or the majority would be one group would align with that group regardless of whether they had high scientific literacy or not. And that goes against the idea of like rational politics where you're weighing someone's argument against logic and factual evidence. And that doesn't factor into decision making for these individuals because generally, like you and I know as engineers, we have to factor in things for our jobs. We have to use facts because if we don't, we could get people killed, we could get fired, and it's just bad practice. The same thing goes for scientists when they're doing their jobs, but when it matters less, like if you're not doing something for a job, for money, or something of that nature, you end up seeing this trend where people don't really care about the facts as much, and they align with these established groups and the ideas that they hold as a population. So,
notice from sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I notice on Facebook, I'm friends with a guy who ran against Jeff Fortenberry in the Nebraska 2 district.
Right.
Or is he 1st district? I can't remember.
I think Fortenberry's 1st district. I want to say he's first. Either way.
Okay. It's the second geographically larger one that has Lincoln in. Doesn't matter.
Right. First district. Beside the point.
The conservative people that comment on there just shock me because they have their form of arguing is this thing that I'll call what about. You see this a lot with people. You ask a Trump supporter, do you support having your internet privacy go out to the highest bidder? And their response will be something like, well, what about Hillary? And like, that's not a form of arguing at all either. Either you do or you don't. Just simply answer the question.
It's
Hillary
passing
Clinton
blame.
Isn't the president.
No, it's passing blame. And I've seen that in not just Republicans, but anyone really, as if they don't have something to say about it, they bring or don't have an intelligent argument to back up their opinion, then they revert to name calling essentially, or calling someone out on their opposite side. Well, what about them? And that's part of the problem with why this past presidential race, I think, was so ridiculously like combative and unlike those that we had seen in the past, because of the fact that so many people were just concerned about, well, our side won and that's all that matters, which is far from the truth.
That's what it seemed to be like. We were sore losers and stuff. But most of us were more upset that, oh my God, this guy's going to ruin the country.
Yeah, that's exactly
People,
right.
They can't see that from our eyes. They just see that we're ultra leftist snowflakes who want to live in a communist utopia like Soviet Russia. No understanding for what we actually think about. They get the information about what the opposite side of the spectrum thinks from people on their side of the spectrum.
Right.
Like if you want to know what a liberal agenda is, you don't go to Fox News, you don't go to InfoWars. I would go to someone who aligns themselves in the left. If I want to know what a conservative is thinking, I'm going to go see a conservative. It's that simple.
Right. And I have friends and family and colleagues who are more conservative than I am, far and away, and I talk to them on a regular basis to get their ideas of why they have opinions on certain issues or why they voted for our current president or whoever. And it is hard to get in the mindset of someone opposite you, but having someone to talk with about that is paramount in actually being able to reach a compromise and be able to function as a society and not just be so divided like we have been. And bringing up communism, there's actually, I think I read it in either a philosophic book or maybe an article or something, because I have a bunch of those and I've been going through them recently. But there's a quote that I think was like retroactively attributed to Winston Churchill and a bunch of other people, but supposedly was originally quoted from Georges Clemenceau. I'm terrible at French pronunciation, but he was the Prime Minister of France during World War I. And the quote follows as, "Any man who is not a socialist at age 20 has no heart. Any man who is still a socialist at age 40 has no head." And I think that although that's pretty broad, it does hit home with kind of what we see in the population for who votes a certain way, where you have younger people who are of the mindset, like in this article was mentioned with egalitarian communitarian, where they care about their common man and the greater good of society. And then you see not necessarily more selfish, but certainly more individual focused people with the hierarchical individualism as they grow older. So it's a trade-off, and that's always how it's going to be. But coming to a head with all of this discussion is what could be done to kind of congregate everyone and get an agreement and a consensus to fix climate change and work toward the actual study and betterment of it, instead of having policies that go into effect where we're defunding the EPA and the government agencies that are responsible for scientific research, not just climate research, but overall scientific research, by 20 or 30% of their current federal budget allocations.
I think that you kind of have to have a translation, you know what I mean, from one side to the other.
Yeah.
Because what conservatives for the most part have that individualism, liberals for the most part have that sense of community. You kind of have to speak the language from the community to individualism. So how does man-made climate change affect the individual on that level? But also you have to think that most large businesses tend to donate to Republican candidates. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Republican candidates are for things that they're for. Getting rid of regulations, giving them the ability to, screw over their individual employees. Is stuff that's pro-business, not pro-worker. So when you have Scott Pruitt, Rex Tillerson there, climate change bursts their bubble pretty much. It's saying that the industries they're in now are causing tremendous harm to the planet, it's causing harm to the environment, and it could cause even Mr. Gloom and Doom here, but it could cause the end of humanity as we know it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
Trying to think how to bridge that. You have to be able to see from how one person looks at the world compared to the other. If you're just going to have someone, like I said, have a view of what liberals think from a conservative, it's just silly. Like telling me that, hey, if you don't like America, go live in Cuba is nonsense. I would imagine that we want relatively similar things out of the country. Some of them just flat out will admit, at least, which I'm fine with, that they don't agree with universal health care or these other government benefits, but then they don't have something to substitute it, and they don't recognize that that's necessary in this day and age. We're a modern 21st century society. There needs to be a government that reflects that. Individualism can't work when you have over 300 million people living within these borders. It isn't going to work like that. So you have to accept something from both sides. There's good ideas from both sides, whether you think so or not. Maybe one has less than the other. I'm not going to say who. But the way that we need to bridge that is fuzzy.
Right. It's politics, and politics is always fuzzy. That's an
don't want to.
understatement.
I think people are also afraid to talk about it with other people in the opposing view because I feel like a lot of people probably, if they ever meet a Trump supporter, just want to call them names or something. Feel like they're just talking to a brick wall.
Oh yeah, and I've seen that
But
in people that I know personally who have even said to me point blank that they're scared or afraid to talk to people who have dissenting opinions to theirs in politics specifically, but that carries over to other areas as well. And that's stupid. I mean, if you're an egalitarian communitarian, if you're of that mindset, as I think most of us our age are, then you should be willing to engage in conversation with someone who has a opposing viewpoint to yours so that you can better understand them and progress, make progressive movements toward a compromise. And with regard to climate change, I think selling that in a manner of saying, selling that to conservatives or climate change deniers, if there are climate change deniers who are Democrats or liberals, I'm sure there's someone out there who is, try and find a way to show them or appeal to that individualism through either policy or a business or economic way, and that could be any number of things.
you see why that's not happening right now, Climate change fundamentally changes the way that these companies change energy. Instead of coal companies getting with the times and investing in green energy, kind of switching the source of energy that they're going with, they decided to stick with it. And now these coal jobs that have left places like Appalachia, they're not coming back because of regulations. They're not coming back because there's cheaper ways to produce energy. There's cheaper places to mine coal. It's just silly thinking. The individual heard from Trump, I'm going to bring your jobs back. They heard that to themselves on an individual level. And maybe they thought about their families and not much outside of that. When I hear he says he's going to bring jobs back, I want to know how. On a group level throughout the country, what jobs does he plan on bringing back? So you see what I mean? There's a way to get from the micro into the macro. I was at a diner once, and I'm sitting at the counter. I'm by myself, and there are these three guys talking politics next to me. The guy next to me turns to me, and he asked me if I'm a liberal, and he thought that just because I was a young guy. So I told him I am, and he gave me the typical laundry list of stuff. Clinton and her emails and Benghazi and all this stuff. And I said to him, let me ask you, what made you think I was a liberal? And he said, well, because you're young. Well, I said, I didn't think you were a conservative when I walked in. I only thought that when I heard you talking. And he kind of froze there for a second. And that kind of told me that there's a little too much profiling there, and him thinking that he knew what I thought and what my background was. When I told him I was an engineer, he didn't know that. He probably thought I was just, I kind of dress like a like a hipster. I always wear flannel shirts and stuff. I got thick glasses.
I'm the same way.
I mean, maybe he saw me and thought, oh, here's a liberal, bleeding heart hippie who wants free college and stuff.
I mean,
once we learned that, what both of us do for a living. Well, he was retired, did for a living.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind free college, but
yeah, there's a sense that there's community growing between two people right there, two individuals. Hey.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. You can't just assume stuff. Is the big deal. You can't just assume, okay, climate change is incorrect because I've read this. Well, what about the science? Have you ever heard from a climatologist or read anything from them? Oh, they're biased. Well, how do you know that? You haven't looked at it.
Well, they shouldn't be biased because they're scientists.
anything that disagrees with you is not just bias, okay?
Yeah.
It's bias if the language in it clearly is.
Right. And that's not to say that, climate scientists, not all climate scientists agree that climate change is real or that it's affecting us. It's just that like 98 or 99% of them do, which to me is pretty much a majority. I mean, that's an obvious majority. I don't know if you saw I can't remember, I don't think it was Scott Pruitt, the head of the government agency that oversees the study of climate change or the sciences. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they had a hearing either this week or last week about climate change and had one scientist who was there, or climatologist, climate scientist who was there, who was brought in to argue that climate change was in fact real, and then they had three climate scientists or environmental scientists who were the deniers of climate change. So it was kind of stacked in one end's favor, which standard political leaning is present in the government as a whole, president and Congress both. That's how things go. But it's just odd to me that there are scientists out there who have not found through all of the peer-reviewed materials and published papers on the study of the climate that this is a real thing and it's a big problem.
And we can do something about it.
Right. I mean, we got to start now. I mean, we started with the Paris Agreement, but again, that was a little bit less stringent than it needed to be anyway, and I think only 3 countries are going to actually meet that, and I believe they're all pretty small. China's not one of them. We aren't one of them. I'm sure England isn't one of them. So, and China even came out and said, hey, we can't handle all the regulations and stuff on our own. We can't take the U.S.'s responsibility for climate change on our own, chiefly because they're the largest consumer of coal in the world. We're second in that. And China's doing more research into clean energy than we are. It's absurd that we, as quote unquote the most powerful country in the world, are not putting more of our efforts into this global concern, which it definitely is.
I got a national concern for you.
Go ahead.
So, in the near future, or maybe the distant future, you really need to be careful on what you browse on the internet, because Congress has decreed that your ISP can sell your web browsing history to the highest of bidders.
For the highest of marketing profits.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
I really don't want, some of these companies to know how much, like, porn I watch. Because I feel like I think you can tell more about a person, like how to market to them based off the kind of porn that they watch, more than you can about what they put on Facebook. That's not too radical an idea, but now you can really start to mess with people. Just have a separate computer that you do nothing but but just watch porn on.
People are going to have dedicated porn computers.
I would love to see somebody buy that and just see that information on it.
Oh God, it's gone from having boxes under your bed of Playboy or Hustler to hard drives of porn, and now it'll just be whole computers of porn.
You don't even need that. You can just open up a browser and have tabs of porn open.
Oh yeah, but we all know that the internet is for porn. So what else is new?
The internet is for porn.
Yep. That's right. Good old Avenue Q? Yeah, Avenue Q.
Trekking Monster song.
Oh, yeah. Been a long time.
I forgot what the name of this organization, but they released the donations from telecom companies, telecom employees, basically anyone who's donated that's involved with a telecom company through PACs or directly. You got to look this list up when you can, because it's kind of ridiculous how easily some of the people in the Senate and Congress are just bought. Like my one of my senators, I live in Ohio. One of our senators, his named Rob Portman, got $89,350 in campaign donations from the telecom industry.
I'm sure that's probably one of the lighter buyouts.
Yeah. Actually, it's probably like just above average.
Yeah, well,
that's how bad.
Still,
bad
I mean, lobbying's been going on for decades. Honestly, it's just that now with the advent of immediate news and this kind of like, I don't want to call it a leak culture of like WikiLeaks and that sort of crap, where we're hearing about it more prevalently. I'm sure people who have been involved with it for years, and even individuals living in Washington, D.C., have been privy to that for a long time. It's just becoming more widespread knowledge. And it's crap because it comes down to, politicians are being bought by the highest bidder, and they don't really work for the people as much as our democracy campaigns or champions that they do. And I think really that whole lobbying thing definitely does go back to the telemarketing companies, because if you look at that, the privacy regulations that were rescinded or revoked, all of that had to do with the fact that like Google and Facebook and those internet-based companies are able to pull data from your usage, because everyone uses Google and pretty much everyone uses Facebook. They're able to use that for marketing, and the telecommunication companies aren't, and they're pissed off. They've been pissed off since that was enacted, because they don't have a chance to use that information for their own marketing dollars.
You know what I find interesting about lobbying is that a lot of people don't consider the lobbyists themselves, because these people have communication with people in Congress, They know each other and on a personal level. They know their family members. It's not just about money either, Yeah, they get kickbacks from these people, but they know these people. Sherrod Brown, the Democratic senator from Ohio, he didn't vote for this internet privacy thing. No one's throwing money at him to vote for it. He doesn't know many lobbyists personally from that sector of business. So there's a lot more to it. There's more levels to lobbying than just money. There's relationships that grow from it. It's legal bribery in a sense, but it's legal bribery with a smile on your face.
It's almost like a business, like a secondary business within Congress, because that's like, at least in our profession, in the sector that I'm involved in, you have to forge business relationships with other people, and this goes for anything, let alone engineering, but you have to forge those relationships to get jobs and keep a business running. And it's kind of like this whole deal with lobbying is part of the business of government, as kind of slimy and backdoorish as it is when concerned with what they're actually doing and pushing a small group of people's interests into government that may not align with the general populace or, the voting public.
Oh, man. It makes you question stuff. Remember when we went to D.C.? What were we, in 8th grade?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
We were getting a tour of the building where some of the congressmen, senators have their office at. There's a tramway that they take from those buildings.
Yep.
Into the Capitol building every day.
I remember that.
So in that building, we find out that in that very same building are lobbyists. if you can believe that.
Oh, yeah.
Lobbyists have their office in the same building and next door to Congress. Doesn't that make you feel all warm and fuzzy?
Oh, yeah. They can just go knock on someone's door and have some coffee and toss money under the table.
Boy,
Fantastic.
you know, I don't want any companies to know how many times I've watched the It trailer either.
It's a good trailer.
This is a pretty good trailer. I hope it's a good movie.
Yeah, I think it's got
You
potential.
were saying something.
No, not really. I was just
We have
agreeing
nothing
with-
to say. We wasted 36 or so minutes of your time.
Yeah, I mean, we can blather on about internet privacy and terrible lobbying and all of that other stuff, but
You know what else kind of tie into that is the number of, if you read any of the stuff that Republicans are repealing or adding, a lot of times in many articles you'll see this phrase, Obama era.
yep.
A lot of stuff that was Obama's they're getting rid of. So I don't know if that's just because, the first black president put it in there or they genuinely don't like him. But I'm not going to insinuate either way.
No, I think I mean, if it was, if the previous president had been, a Democrat who was not a black man or a quote unquote Muslim, as some people still oddly confuse him up or
Really?
try
I didn't think there were people like that out there still.
No, yeah, I hear from him every once in a while. I don't know why.
Oh, boy.
But point aside, I think that it's more about just party lines than anything. They may have some vitriol against this black man who came in and was the first black president and represented the people generally pretty well. I mean, there were certainly some things with the amount of executive orders that he signed into effect, and I mean, some people were thinking that was a little bit too much executive branch power.
And then Trump said, "Hold my beer."
Oh yeah, but I mean that kind of goes hand in hand with when you're switching over to a new party government. Executive orders get signed for switching people around and things like that. It's pretty commonplace, but certainly Trump signed as many executive orders into effect, more executive orders into effect in his first 2 weeks in office than our previous president did. But that's just, I mean, you can go back and forth on that based upon where you stand on party lines. It's all pretty general government action on that sort of thing. But, politics
I think we
is
can.
bleh.
Sorry, I keep doing that.
You do, but, whatever. Politics, safe to say, final point on this, politics sucks, but we'll keep talking about it because it sucks.
Yes, talk to people with different views. It's okay to have different views, but you got to stand by them and you got to answer questions about them. Otherwise, you're just a mindless robot.
Exactly.
Anyway,
you can find people who disagree with you and talk to them and be genial about it. And you can find scientists, climate change scientists or environmental scientists or even just physicists and chemists who agree or disagree with your viewpoints. There are studies out there for everything and every opinion that you can find and align yourself with. It's about determining what is actually accepted and based around fact and taking that into your own opinion and consideration of your opinion. That's what's important. But you were saying we can move on here.
if you want to.
Yeah, I think
I've said my piece at least.
I have too. I get tired of politics after it's been practically 40 minutes. So
All right, we the latter part of this is like a rapid fire back and forth stuff. So
I'm good with that.
yes. So let me start off, like I said earlier, with the trailer for Stephen King's It. The remake coming out September this year was released yesterday, I think.
Yeah, or a couple days
Um,
ago.
Initial thoughts, John.
I think it looks decent. I know some people had some complaints about the redesign of Pennywise, but honestly, I think it's a good update. And the kids, the characters of the children, I know one of them is from Stranger Things, which fills me with hope because all of those kid actors are fantastic. And I think it's going to do a better job of being a little more true to the book in certain areas, just based on the first, 2 minutes of this trailer for it. So I'm excited. And also, funny enough, the original film for it came out in like 1990, I think. And
I think so, yeah.
that's exactly 27 years from 2017. And if you remember from Stephen King's It, in the town of Derry, it comes around and resurfaces every 27 years. Minor coincidence?
I don't know. Can you confirm it came out in 1990? I want to be sure.
I'm gonna look that up, but I'm pretty sure I checked earlier, and I'm pretty sure it came out in 1990. Let's see here. The book came out in 86. I know that, and I want to say that the movie was then in 1990.
It was a mini series, I think, on TV.
Yeah, it was 1990. The novel was adapted into a television miniseries.
Oh, right. Cool. 27 years from then.
Yep.
Here we are again.
Yep. I don't know if that was done on purpose. I'd like to believe that it was kind of like, sort of like the reboot of the Tron series being, set, 20 years, 30 years in the future. But
so, do you think in 2044 we'll have another remake?
I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but I think
I don't know if I could take that.
Yeah, we'd be reminiscing about the olden days far more at that point. But
See, so I read the book about that was quite some time ago, but I always like when books are adapted into television or movies, just because it's a different take on the book.
Yeah.
I don't want to just watch the book verbatim in a movie. I want a different take on it. So seeing Pennywise look the way he does, I think is a lot better than the original. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but I did not like Tim Curry as Pennywise at all. His voice was just himself. It was as if Frankenfurter had chain smoked every day from the filming of Rocky Horror Picture Show and reappeared as Pennywise the Clown. Like, the voice was just odd to me. It wasn't good.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't hear Pennywise's voice in the trailer. He looks significantly more terrifying, which I don't know what people are upset about. I like the look of him personally. He doesn't look overly menacing, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like forced.
He looks just menacing enough, more menacing than a regular clown, that that something more is there.
Right.
And
so
I would agree with you on Tim Curry's voice definitely not being the best. Granted, Tim Curry's a great actor in general, but just maybe not for a horror movie where he's playing a clown.
I mean, the two things to be scary as a clown are the mannerisms and the voice. And I think the mannerisms were okay. The facial expressions, okay. The voice, no, not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you're expecting, for those of you who haven't read the book and don't know, like, it is some, like, interdimensional creature that has been on Earth for billions of years. And I found this kind of funny in the book, but his true form cannot be comprehended by human beings. So when they see him in his true form, see it in its true form for the first time, it's a giant spider.
Yeah.
because they can't comprehend anything else but giant spider.
Yeah, it's
Anyways,
odd, but anyway, I think it'll be interesting to see. I look forward to seeing that in theaters and hopefully taking along someone who's squeamish with horror movies, because that's the best part of seeing horror movies.
Absolutely.
So, moving on from that into the realm of some heavy science, I was reading through some articles this week and found one pertaining to dark energy and dark matter. I don't know if you're privy to all of that fun science or not.
Yes, I am.
Well, for those of you who aren't, dark matter and dark energy, I'm sure you probably heard about it. If you're even if you aren't a scientist, you probably heard about that sort of lingo in maybe science fiction novels or even movies. I'm sure, I think the Avengers mentioned some form of dark energy or whatever in like the Tesseract or... Anyway, beside the point, researchers have done a study on a theoretical model, not an experimental setup, but a theoretical model that essentially argues the expansion of the universe may not be due to dark energy, as is the general accepted belief currently. So, dark matter and dark energy are part of the universe, where dark matter is essentially the opposite of matter. Not in the sense of antimatter, which is something completely different, but dark matter is something that we can not see, but it exists and accounts for approximately 27% of the content of the universe, whereas normal matter is like 5%, or visible matter. And then dark energy makes up about 68% of the universe, and dark energy is what's responsible for the acceleration of the universe, the expansion of the universe, the acceleration behind that. And so this research team, I should say, was led by a Hungarian PhD student. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name because I will butcher the hell out of it.
Just call him Budapest.
Well, we could call him Budapest. Although I don't think he was from Budapest. Where was it?
I know, but I mean, most people know Budapest is in Hungary, and I can't think of anything else.
That's true. It was some university in Hungary. Again, not going to try and pronounce it. Anyway, basically what it comes down to is that conventional models of cosmology rely on approximations of Einstein's equations of general relativity that ignore the universe's structure, and they assume that matter is of uniform density. And those approximations are coarse, so they're not as fine as they could be. And so this study is kind of pushing for those approximations of those equations to be more fine and a little more constrained, to show that dark energy doesn't necessarily account for the acceleration of the universe. So it's kind of developmental, really, but the fact that they're saying that dark energy isn't necessary for determining the acceleration of the universe is kind of crazy, because with that model they could have some sort of debate about, a different idea of how the universe exists and what it's made of. So kind of neat stuff there. Really a little bit out there, but certainly interesting. Food for thought.
Not too far-fetched.
No.
Not as far-fetched as this farmer in Indonesia who went missing. And guess where they found him? You'll never believe it.
Was it in a python?
It was in a python.
I heard about this.
His body was found in a python. Now, they haven't... no one confirmed that the python killed him, but his body was in it. I'm kind of not buying this story from the pictures I've seen. I mean, I very well could be wrong, but for a number of reasons. One, that snake is way too damn skinny to swallow a whole human being. Like, you see those really big anacondas they find in, like, the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, the
Those
things that are
things
like
as
20
thick
foot
as
long.
a car rim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. That little rinky-dinky python you could probably buy at Petco.
I know I
But
saw
man,
a couple pictures of
What if
it.
he was killed by that python?
I don't know. I saw a couple pictures of it, but I didn't like look at them in depth. And to me, it just kind of looked like he'd swallowed an irregularly shaped fence post or like a trash can.
I'm just, A, I can't believe that it happened if it really did. And B, I wouldn't be surprised if it was fake.
I mean, I've heard of pythons and anacondas eating like mammals, like deer or something like that. Not deer necessarily, because I don't think the deer that we know of in North America live in the Amazon rainforest or, Indonesian
Deer-like
rainforest.
animals.
Right.
Capybaras.
Gazelle?
That is in Africa.
Yeah. Snakes are in Africa. I don't know. There's got to be some four-legged mammal that lives in Indonesia in the rainforest where a python or an anaconda could get to it. But I don't know. It's possible, but it's one of those things that's on the internet that you can't necessarily fully believe. But one thing that that you can believe that's on the internet, and just general news that happened today, was SpaceX rocket launch of the first reused rocket. I don't know if you saw that that webcast that happened earlier today, but they launched.
I did see it, and I was a little taken back that was the first reused rocket. Not space shuttle. There's a difference, okay?
Yeah, there's a major difference. What's interesting is that when watching this webcast, of course, everybody in SpaceX is there in a big group, and they're all cheering and going nuts, which good for them. I mean, when you work as hard as they do on these rockets and their systems, that they have every right to be excited about it. But the thing that comes to mind for me, being an engineer, and I'm sure this is on your mind as well, is the repeatability of it. They've done it once. Now they need to do it again and again and again with little to no anomalies or any failures in order for it to be really, truly viable. And that's extremely difficult in rocket launching. As
stuff like this, it's baby steps,
Yeah.
As you've seen, this is the first time they've reused a rocket. The first time. How long have rockets been around,
Yeah. I mean, we've been using rockets since the 50s. Well, if you go back to Germany, it's been being used since the 40s, mid 40s. So it's always been a tricky business, and it's good to see that we're progressing in this direction, because I mean, NASA doesn't have the funding to do this kind of stuff, which is a whole nother discussion. But having these private agencies that are able to do this is great, not only because it affords more technology advancement for the space industry, but SpaceX is kind of serving the role that NASA did for us when we were younger, or people who are involved in engineering now would probably say, everyone, if you ask them about NASA, at least in the US and I'm sure elsewhere, that shuttle launches, I mean, going back to the Apollo program and looking at that, I know I grew up being extremely interested in everything NASA, and I think SpaceX is serving that role a little better than NASA is now, because missions have become more drawn out and it's more robotic focused, and just now NASA's starting to get back in with the Orion program. Well, they have astronauts going into space again. So it's serving a dual purpose, and I wish them the best of luck. It seems like they're on the right track, but as an engineer, I'm always wary of getting ahead of the curve and getting too excited too quickly. Is it's SpaceX isn't exempt from failures. They've had plenty of their own failures of rockets and other things alike. So they've got a long road ahead of them, but they're doing good.
Running out of time, so I'll try to make my last two.
Go for
real
it.
quick. The James Webb Telescope, if you don't know, it will be the replacement for the Hubble telescope.
Yep.
The planned launch is November of 2018, although they've given themselves ample time in case there's any setbacks, so it could be put out months before that. Anyway, so they have the large mirror put together. That's right. The mirror is 16 hexagons of beryllium plated with gold.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to be one expensive thing.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is now headed down to Houston to do temperature testing in that humongous chamber that they tested the Apollo hardware in. So it'll be put through a vacuum and really super cold temperatures it would experience in space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The telescope will mainly be used to pick up the oldest stars in the universe that we have yet to see on our current telescopes available.
Mm-hmm. It's less of a replacement for Hubble directly and more of kind of like an auxiliary telescope or a brother to Hubble, because it does operate on a slightly different spectrum than Hubble does. And I think
it uses infrared, I believe.
Right, it can't see everything that Hubble can, and Hubble can't see everything that it can. The point is that the James Webb telescope has a larger mirror and thereby has better resolution for seeing what it can see. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that performs, and hopefully it doesn't have any anomalies like Hubble did when it launched and they had to go up there and fix the primary mirror with some corrective lenses, because there's no way that anybody's getting to the James Webb telescope when it goes out, because it's going to be a heck of a lot further away.
So did you hear about the superfluid helium had behavior like a black hole?
I did, and it's interesting. I know we talked about some quantum mechanical funny stuff last week as well, but I'll go through it quickly and try and hit the main points.
Was it just sucking things into it? Like, what?
Well,
I wasn't sure what they meant by behaving like a black hole.
right. So it goes back to quantum entanglement again, studying quantum entanglement. Essentially what this research group did was ran another computer simulation of a helium-4 sphere. That isotope of helium is the same that you put in balloons to fill them up. And they lowered its temperature down to about 2 Kelvin, or negative 271 degrees Celsius, which is 2 degrees above absolute zero. And they studied the entanglement of helium atoms inside and outside of a sphere of helium-4. And what they found was, as the size of the sphere increased, the entropy of entanglement also increased. That is, the energy associated with the atoms on either side, the entanglement between those increased, and the rate of that increase matched the sphere's surface area increase. And that is what's defined as the area law. Now, this area law has been shown in, or is assumed to be shown in, black holes, where information or matter on the inside and outside of the event horizon of a black hole would experience the same sort of quantum entanglement. So it's really hard to show that experimentally, but again, it's kind of crazy, and they could look into using it for developing a more full theory of quantum gravity, which would tie together the quantum level of gravity and the macro general theory of gravity. So cool applications there for some more science-y content.
Finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. Scientists have recreated a woman's menstrual cycle in a dish.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me more.
The dish was reported to be extremely moody. No, I'm kidding.
God damn.
So the work is basically part of a project where you would take someone's tissue and put it in a body on a chip, basically what you would call it. It's a little chip with tissue in it. So the idea being that you have a chip, someone's tissue's on it, you can study its reaction to different drugs, treatments for different diseases, things like that. So this group was able to recreate the female reproductive system and the complete menstrual cycle. Now, obviously, there weren't fertilized eggs involved, but they were able to recreate the cycle, not the physical attributes to it, the getting rid of uterine lining and that fun stuff that's involved in it.
And blood.
Just the cycle itself. So,
right.
It's a good way to get in the direction that they're heading, to being able to have this little something that's the size of a microchip that they can use to test different treatments out on people. So you don't have to inject someone with chemotherapy and pray that it works anymore. You could just plug in this chip and see if it works for you.
Yeah. Faster, essentially prototyping for drugs, really, is what it is. Drugs and treatment procedures. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. Well, that's about it, I think we've got for this week. We're running up on time. So,
John, do you have any final statements?
Final statements. Well,
or any April Fool's prank?
Oh, God. I've never been the biggest April Fool's prankster, but one thing I would say is I wish that our president would resign and say that his reign was all a April Fool's joke, and that Congress would do the same. But that won't happen. So my final thoughts along those lines would be for everyone to kind of take to heart what we were talking about earlier with talking to your neighbor or a stranger who may have conflicting opinions to yours, being open to discussion of those, and making sure that when you are discussing something along those lines, don't revert to just getting pissed off and trying to be confrontational, but have an intelligent discussion. Use facts, look up information, and do your own background research, and be smart about how you discuss things, because that's really the only way we're going to get forward momentum going into our futures. Nick, your thoughts?
Well, I'm stealing this idea. Well, I don't know if I'm going to go through with it, but I had the idea for an April Fool's Day prank was to take donuts into work tomorrow, but just have the donut box and inside have it be a vegetable tray.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure
terrible
some
person.
Of my coworkers would probably murder me.
Yeah, you don't fuck with donuts.
Throw me into the injection molding machine.
You don't screw with work donuts. That's like a sacred thing.
No. Kind of what you said, get to know a conservative.
Or a liberal.
Show a little empathy. Put on the conservative glasses for a little while, and if you don't like it, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
All right. I got nothing left. We don't have any current topics on for next week, but I'm sure Trump and the Republicans will give us plenty to talk about, as they usually do.
And hopefully science will continue to soldier on, and I'm sure it will give us a few more things to talk about in that regard. Well,
that's right.
It's been a pleasure. Next week we'll have more things going on, or maybe the week after that. Depends on scheduling. But it was a pleasure speaking to you this evening. My name is John. I'm an engineer. I enjoy bowling and alcoholic beverages of the grain and barley and hops kind.
My name is Nick. I'm also an engineer. I enjoy coffee, and Overwatch. I'm currently silver, if you're looking for anyone to play with. Everybody, have a great weekend. Keep your April Fool's Day pranks to a minimum this year. I don't think many people can put up with more jokes.
Nah,
Bye, everybody.
we've got enough in government. Adios.